be 31. There was once a young, very well-behaved 8-year-old boy named Miles. He did all the things that good children are supposed to do. Nearly all the time, he ate all his vegetables, unless they were carrots. He completed all of his school assignments, except for that one time he forgot to finish his homework. He was always very nice to his friends, unless you count that one time when he yelled at his schoolmates. Unless you count that one time when he yelled at his schoolmate Tony, and he never spoke back to his parents or got mad at them, which with very rare expectations. Yes, he was nearly perfect, and he was a joy for his parents to raise almost all the time. That boy existed more than 30 years ago, and in a manner of speaking, he still exists. That boy, he's me, and he will always be a part of who I am. I can remember every I made as a child, not only because there were so few of them, but because they ended up shaping my life in a way you could never imagine.
Hey, you get showered.
Of all of my misdeeds, the one that stands out very much. cows scare me. It's the very last time I yelled at my parents. The funny thing is, though, even though I can remember being mad, and I can remember every word I said, I don't recall exactly why I was upset. When I try to think of the reason, it's like looking at a blank sheet of paper in my mind. I can tell you that it wasn't anything my adult self would find weird or anything like that. But I know it felt important at the time. It was 2 days before I cannot talk. Talking has left my mind. No, it felt blah blah blah. It was 2 days before Christmas, and the words I spoke left foreign as they came out of my mouth. Probably because I'd never said anything quite like that. What? Go away, I don't want... Go away, I don't want you here to be here anymore. I don't want you to talk to me again. I could see the hurt in my parents' eyes as I unleashed my anger towards them. Even now, I'm surprised at what a profound effect the words from my 8-year-old self had on them. Their dismay was mixed with obvious shock upon hearing me lash out. My mother had a look on her face that was confused, sad, and angry all at the same time. Father was harder to read, but I knew he wasn't very happy with me. Sadly, the looks on their faces are among the last memories I have of my parents. Their scowls are burned in my mind. Bleh. Burned in my mind are now too permanent part of my psyche. By the time that Christmas Eve came around, all had been forgiven. Whatever the issue had been, it was resolved. My mother cooked a special ham dinner, and we had Okay, I need to stop looking at chat. We had a hot fire going. The house was warm and extra comfortable, and in the hours after dinner I sat and sipped from a mug of hot cocoa with peppermint. I no longer believed in Santa Claus, but that didn't stop me from feeling a natural random excitement. I fell asleep that night, staring at the dazzling lights and shiny ornaments that clung to our Christmas tree. I remember my father carrying me to my bedroom and giving me a little kiss on my forehead. I awoke later to a feeling of someone poking their finger into my back. It was a voice. Wake up, kid. It was a voice I'd never heard before. A man's voice, with a slight drawl. My eyes opened widely as I instinctively rolled out of bed in an outright panic. I fell to the floor and screamed for my father. I was trapped in a corner of my bedroom. I could see the man's figure looming clearly in front of me. A small red glow came from a cigarette in his hand. I froze in fear of this stranger who had invaded my home. The man spoke to me again. Quiet down. He can't hear you right now anyhow. He put his cigarette to his lips and inhaled deeply. As he did, his face was illuminated by the red glow. I could see his deep-set eyes, his dirty fingers, and his long black head. Hair. Okay, like kid, I can hear you. I can hear you better than anybody in ways you can't even understand. He pointed at the side of his forehead. Well then. He pointed at the side of his forehead as he spoke. I didn't reply, but even through my fear I couldn't help but wonder who the man was. He nodded, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. So, you'd like to know who I am? Well, I'm the guy who's tuned into your mind. I'm the guy that's been around for a long time. And most importantly, okay, I'd like to die, so kill me. I give you my address, I give you my phone number, I'll give you everything if you kill me. You get muted for at least an hour. I mean, a day. And most importantly, I'm the guy who gives kids what they ask for. He looked straight into my eyes, invading my mind and reading my thoughts. No, kid, I ain't Santa. Who is annoyed. You stupid? Do I really look like that fat fucker? No, man. I'm better. I'm much better. I don't judge, and I don't discriminate. Everyone's awesome, then. Does that count? No. Okay. I give kids what they ask for. The good kids and the bad kids. I finally found the courage to speak, even though he seemed to have no trouble answering my questions before I even asked them. I didn't ask for anything. Like, my voice trembled as I spoke. Sure you did. You wanted your parents to go away. I heard that loud and clear. Loud and clear. Not very nice of you. I'd say that makes you a bad little boy. But don't worry. Like I said, I don't judge. But I don't want them to go away. He shook his head. You said it. You meant it at the time. I heard it. I don't hear all the kids, just some of them. And I hear you loudest of them all. Tears began streaming down my face, but their presence didn't seem to change. The visitors looked towards me. Look, kid, I just wanted to meet you and see whose voice has been screaming in my head the past few days. He turned and started walking towards the door. I gotta get started. It's time to give you your gift. And get a gift for myself too. Merry Christmas, kid. He flicked his cigarette into the corner of my bedroom as he passed through the doorway, repeating himself as he walked down the hallway in the direction of my parents' bedroom. Merry Christmas. The door to my bedroom shut, even though the man himself had made no effort to close it. I screamed aloud for my mother and father. To this day, I still have no idea if they heard me. I wish I could tell you that I bravely ran out of my bedroom to warn them, but I just sat huddled in the corner, crying and afraid. It should be almost over. I listened intently for sounds of a struggle or for my parents yelling, but I couldn't hear anything. Hours passed and I could see the outside sky turn black to gray, then to orange. I waited for my mother and father to find me. The orange sky turned blue as the day wore on, but they never came. An absolute silence hung over the house, yet still I sat there. It was well into the afternoon when I finally left my room. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I tiptoed out of my room, and I tiptoed slowly to my door and opened it only a few inches, looking out from inside my room. The house appeared normal. Everything that I could see was in its place. I pulled the door open all the way, almost expecting the man from the night before to jump out at me, but that didn't happen. I can't be up all night. I can only be up till my internet goes off. Yes. Okay. I pulled the door open all the way. Blah, 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 blah. My voice broke the silence. Mom? Dad? No response. Tried my best to stay quiet. I walked slowly down the hallway towards my parents' bedroom. The door was ajar. Dad? I put my hand on the door. Mom? I pushed it open and looked inside. I don't actually remember what I saw. To be clear, I'm perfectly aware of the fate that befell my parents, based on what was told to me later on. But I have no memory of the actual sight that I was witnessed during that one awful moment. It's a traumatic event that my sane mind has blocked out. Even today, when I recreate the events of that night in my dreams, the scene fades to white as I push the door open. My next memory is of me laying down on the street directly outside my house, screaming and flailing my arms wildly. The Porter family, who lived next door, witnessed my distress through their living room window. Mr. Porter exited his house and rushed over to me. He could tell something was seriously wrong. "They're dead!" It was all I could say. I repeated it again and again. Mrs. Porter followed closely behind her husband and comforted me as he went to check inside my house. A minute later, he exited and promptly vomited in the bushes. Nobody ever told me the whole story of what they found in that bedroom, at least not directly. It was explained to me that a very bad person broke into my house and murdered my parents, even though I already knew as much. What was held back from me at the time, the fact that they'd been decapitated. The cuts were clean, almost as if giving surgery. Both bodies were laying on the bed as if they'd been asleep when it happened. The worst part was that their heads were missing, not to be found anywhere. Their bodies were sliced open, and strange symbols were drawn on the wall in blood. Other than that, absolutely no physical evidence was discovered at the scene. Not one fingerprint, stray hair, or footprint was left behind. Nothing. The police listened to my story once I was ready to talk. I found out later I was considered to be an unreliable witness, mostly because the details of my story didn't match with the lack of physical evidence. A specially trained detective and my new therapist sat down with me to review what I told the police earlier. The man wasn't wearing gloves? I shook my head no. I clearly remembered the cigarette in his hand, and there was no gloves. I shook my head no. Wait, what? No. With no leg on. And he threw the cigarette on the ground when he was done smoking it? I nodded yes. And he closed your door when he left your room? I shook my head no, then thought about it. Then Totes tries following the rules, but yet she will. Actually, Totes told on Pex then. She was going to tell on Jacksepticeye. Now she's breaking the rules. I don't understand her logic anymore. And not in my head, yes. I wasn't really sure. The detective took notes as I talked. He nodded his head pleasantly, but even then I could tell the strange look on his face when I told him that the man had read my thoughts. One thing I had never told the police. That was 2 days before the murders. I'd asked for my parents to be gone. The sketch artist came by afterwards. He started off by drawing some Smurfs for me. Then he slowly began working me up to the task of remembering what the murderer looked like. I appreciate his effort. I can't talk. But he has done. The pictures look somewhat like how I remembered the man, but not exactly. I was taken in by my mother's sister, Aunt Jane, and her husband, my Uncle Ashton. As unlucky as I had been with the deaths of my parents. I have to say that I was nearly as lucky to have those two in my life. Other than my parents, they were probably the best people in the world who I could have who I could have lived with. Looking back at the events of my life, I have to say that today I miss them every bit as much as I miss my parents. Jane worked as an office manager, but she took a leave of absence in the first few months after the murders so that she could be home to support me. Ashton worked for a home security firm. He was the kind of man who always had a smile on his face, so much that it would be impossible for a person to even imagine him angry. He made instant connections with people, and he had confidence about him that made people want to seek his approval, whether consciously or unconsciously. Jane and Ashton didn't have any children of their own, and they'd always have been very generous towards me. I knew them well, so it was easy for me to slip into their lives. I put a huge effort into making sure that I gave them no trouble, and I asked them for nothing. My conversation with the murderer was never too far from my thoughts, and I could hear some of his comments ring through my mind daily. I gave kids what they asked for, the good kids and the bad kids. I didn't know what the good kids were given by this man, but I understood all too clearly what happened to the bad children. It was 2 months before I felt like I was ready to go back to school. Jane and Ashton, and even the school principal, were very helpful and understanding throughout the whole process. The classroom welcomed him, like the classroom can speak. Okay. My classmates welcomed me back with smiles and words of encouragement. It's often said that children can be cruel, but I think it's even more true that they can be sweet and supportive. I really can't emphasize enough how much returning to all my friends helped me along in the healing process. My anxiety began to fade away, and my therapist proclaimed that it was a major milestone for me. Despite the progress in my physical healing, there were always several thoughts that I couldn't get rid myself of. Oh no. Never spill slime onto your bed. This is where I'm gonna die. Okay. The first was the guilt that I felt about asking my parents to go away. I knew full well that the murder of my parents was in no way of my fault, but there was always that nagging voice that wouldn't let it drop. I'd ask for them to be taken away. and that's exactly what had happened. The second thought was that the murderer would return again the following Christmas. All the adults assured me that he would be arrested quickly. Then, when that didn't happen, I was promised that there would be no way he could ever get his hands on me, and that I was safe. They made sure that I was never left alone, and that when Jane went back to work, she only did so part-time, so that she could pick me up when school let out. I also had difficulty with the more unbelievable aspects of what happened that night. I tried to convince myself on a daily basis that the murderer was just a normal man, and that the memory of those elements were merely my own imagination betraying me. And this is why I shouldn't look at chat. But just like the guilt I felt, the troubling thought that this man was more than just a man didn't subside entirely. For the victims of trauma, for me, it can be often trigger symptoms like depression and fear. For me, Christmas was the anniversary of my worst memory. As the summer ended, Jane and Austin, along with my therapist, decided early that Christmas wouldn't be celebrated in our household that year. And what I felt that I'd be ready for it, and they were right. Since we knew that Christmas was going to be an ordinary day for us, Jane and Ashton made sure to throw a big birthday party in October that year. When I turned 9, it seemed like most of the community turned out. We had a bounce house, ponies, and even a magician. Everyone, including me, had a wonderful day. It was probably the first time in 10 months that I'd ever grinned. Sure, there had been smiles up to that point, but I'm referring to the type of grin where your teeth show and the emotion on your face can't be mistaken. Unfortunately, the joy of my birthday couldn't last forever. The signs of Christmas slowly started popping up not long after Halloween passed, and my anxiety started increasing. Though we weren't celebrating it, Christmas would be impossible to ignore. Holiday lights, store displays, television, more advertisements, Yuletide songs pumped over public address systems. How can one avoid all those and still function within society? Those harbingers couldn't be avoided altogether. Jane and Ashton made a concerted effort to minimize my exposure. Instead of letting me watch my TV shows, Ashton taught me the game of chess, which we played nightly, and for the most part, they avoided taking me to any stores and kept me home, or close by as much as possible. Avoiding these triggers probably helped somewhat, but I still couldn't get away of the tightening feeling in my chest that I felt every single morning I woke up. I managed to avoid any sort of breakdown until the 21st of December. Aunt Jane, because she was taking care of me, had herself been staying home an odd amount of time. Finally, our 5th game of Romeo in a row, she'd had enough. She tossed her cards aside. You know what, Miles? We've been cooped up here too long. Let's get out of here. We'll go get some ice cream. One little trip won't hurt, right? I smiled in response. Okay, ice cream sounded good, even in the middle of December. Aunt Jane, who is talkative by nature, kept the conversation flowing all the way to the ice cream shop. I suppose this was her attempt to keep my focus away from the lights and displays that we passed, and it worked too. Ask a kid questions about his favorite superheroes, and he's going to fairly preoccupied while he talks about them, even the quiet ones. We made it to the shop. When will this story end? Okay. We made it into the shop. I ordered a double scoop of chocolate fudge brownie. We sat down to eat our treats, with Aunt Jane still engaging me into conversation. Just for a brief moment, a nearby toy store's glittering Christmas display caught my eye through the window. They had a life-size poster plastered on their display window. It was a picture of Santa upon the rooftop, posed in a position that, if he were just about ready to climb down a chimney. Blazing Christmas lights surrounded this way, and large words spelled out, "What do you want for Christmas?" I tried to turn away, but the colorful lights clouded my vision, enlarging in their scope until they all combined, finally creating a great white light. Miles? Miles! My aunt's voice was becoming more and more urgent. I suddenly realized she'd been calling my name for several moments. The cup of ice cream dropped from my hands. I just want them back. At that moment, the tears flowed freely. I could think of nothing else. Aunt Jane quickly came to my side of the table. "Oh my God, Miles, I'm so sorry." She grabbed and hugged me tightly, holding on to her as firmly as I could. "This was a bad idea. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry I brought you out. That was stupid of me. I'm so sorry. I missed them too." It took at least 15 minutes for Aunt Jane to calm me to a point. It took at least 15 minutes for Aunt Jane to calm me to a point where we could leave the shop. We left our unfinished ice creams behind. No other incidents happened in the next couple of days, and my interactions with Ashton and Jane helped distract me. Finally, it was Christmas Eve. I was quiet all day long, even more than usual. Austin noticed and had a talk with me after dinner. "You okay, buddy?" I nodded my head yes. Despite my assurance that I was okay, he could tell I wasn't. He knew almost exactly what was on my mind. "Come here, Miles. Let me show you a few things." I could follow him to the living room window, where he moved the curtains aside. "See these windows?" He slapped his hand on the pane to show me how solid it was. "This is the strongest window that they make for residents. My company installed these. they're unbreakable, and there's no way someone can open them from the outside. I stared out the window, while on the other side, blackness enveloped inside the house. He took me over to the door. See how strong this is? It would take a tank to knock this door down. The back door too. And there's no other way in. He led me to the alarm control panel that was on the wall. This is the best system that they make. I installed it myself. He kneeled down to my level. Miles, you're safe here. Nobody, and I mean nobody, can get in unless we let them in. He glanced to the side with his eyes. And don't tell your aunt I showed you this. He moved his coat aside so that I could see a pistol he was wearing. Just some added protection, but I won't even need this. I nodded, feeling a bit safer now, but not completely. I was still worried, not only for myself, but for Jane and Ashton as well. Bedtime approached, and Jane, with an insight usually reserved for long-time mothers, knew that the one thing that might make a night easier for me. Miles, do you want to sleep in our room tonight? She asked. Yes. I smiled and nodded at the invitation. We would all be able to look out for each other. They'd protect me, and I'd be allowed to warn them if someone came in. They put some soft blah blah blah. The dream I had that night was The dream I had that night was unlike any other I'd had before. I was in what appeared to be a large garage, the type where mechanics worked on cars. All around me, automotive parts were spread out along the ground. Tires were stacked up, and an old rusted car filled the center of the room. Room dripped from walls. The area was lit by a single overhead lamp. I instantly knew what I was dreaming, even though it was the first time I'd been experiencing this dream. From the corner of the garage, I heard metal clanking. I turned around to face the sound, and out of darkness, the man who'd taken the lives of my parents emerged. Okay. Yeah. He'd spit something onto the ground and wiped his mouth before addressing me. Hey kid, don't worry. I ain't gonna hurt you. I'd like to though. I'd really like to be able to shut you up, but it don't work like that way. Despite my surroundings, and perhaps because it was a dream, this didn't feel like a place of anger and fear. Unlike the year before, I was able to find my voice right away. Why do you want to shut me up? I hardly ever even speak. When you consider some of those other obvious questions, I know it may sound strange when I chose to open with that. Who is this man? And why did he take interest in me? Those were the questions I was really thinking, and my participation in the dream was scouted, as if my actions weren't wholly my own. The man finally responded. Hell, you quiet ones are the loudest of them all. Y'all never stop thinking. Thought after thought, you kids can't ever just shut your brains off. Give me just one loud mouth. Those kids never think about anything. Tell you what, if it was up to me, I'd just rip all your heads off and be done with it. But like I said, it don't work that way. I ain't allowed to hurt a child. I looked around and came to slow realization. This isn't my dream, is it? That's a stupid question. You ever dream of a place like this? Of course not. This is my dream, kid. I'm parked right outside your house. I just wanted to take a moment to peek in on you. Fear of this man, which had been otherwise controlled to this point, slowly began creeping back. He saw the look of despair cross my face. Have you been a good boy this year? He gave a little chuckle. Actually, yes. Wait, what? Actually, yes, you have been. Do you remember what I said last time? I give kids what they ask for, the good ones and the bad ones. I shook my head. I shook my head. I didn't ask for anything. I spoke with confidence that I didn't really feel. Sure you did. You kids always ask for something. And don't you worry now, cause you're gonna get it. The room, the man began to fade away. See you next year, kid. I get the feeling that you and I are gonna be part of each other's lives for a long time. Those were the last words I heard. Pure whiteness consumed me. And then I slept peacefully. My eyes opened. Outside the window I could see the gray sky that signaled the approaching dawn. The house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I stayed fixed in my bed on the floor, listening for signs of life. Of my aunt and uncle, but I could only hear my own heartbeat. I wanted to sit up and look over to them, but I was afraid of what I might find. The dream felt so real. I wasn't sure what to think. I continued to listen. Please, I whispered to myself. Let me hear them breathe. Several minutes passed. I still heard nothing. Tears began streaming down my face and my pillow became wet. I knew deep inside that eventually I would have to look and see if they were okay. I couldn't lay on the floor all day. But my good instinct told me that I didn't want to witness what was up there. Drawing my own deepest strengths, I put my hands over my eyes and sat up. Slowly, I moved a single finger, not a single tear. God, grammar. Can't do anything with grammar. Okay. From my teary eye. There was no blood, no gore. I pulled my hands fully off from my face. It's just good. That might be good. That's when I saw it, sitting right on top of the dining room table. I froze in place and looked all around to see if there was anything else out of place, but everything was as it should have been. I turned again and stared at the definitely hadn't been there the night before. Had agreed we weren't yet there sat the top so that I could see the top of the gift. Whoever had wrapped it had taken their time. The box's lid was wrapped separately from the box itself. I lifted it up, then I peered inside. There was no fade to white for me that time. No, I saw exactly what was in the box, and simultaneously 3 truths occurred to me. First truth, that the man had been in my house. Despite all the security measures, he had gotten in and out without raising a single alarm. The second truth was that the man had been right. I had asked for something without realizing it. Third truth was that I stood there on the chair, staring into my parents' dried-out eyes, which were still in their decapitated heads, which were both in the box. I said I wanted them back, and the man, however, he did it and heard me, and granted my wish in a manner befitting his evil ways. The ultimate truth that I learned from the day that there could be no mess-ups in my behavior. I could want for nothing. One was being constantly invaded. Bad actions would be severely punished, and even good behavior would lead to its own sick and twisted reward. And even on the story on how, and that's the story of how a very well-behaved boy became and this is when my phone probably decides to die. God. Gee. It's just me now. First to say first. Yep, it's dead. Okay. Good night, guys.